There are more than 100,000 Canadians living with Parkinson's disease. That is staggering, and no cure for the disease, but there are treatments that can help. And for Parkinson's Awareness Month, health specialist Leah Sarich is here with a new treatment option for patients.
Yeah, and this is always really good news, especially when you come across a disease like this that's chronic and then there's no cure. So Parkinson's is a neurodegenerative disease. So neuro meaning brain, degenerative means steadily getting worse. So it's a really devastating disease. It's usually diagnosed in people over the age of about 65. So movement is controlled by dopamine in the brain. That's a chemical in the brain. But in Parkinson's, those cells that produce the dopamine, they stop working prematurely, so too soon. So what happens is you get about 60% of patients end up with that tremor that we all know in their hands. They also end up with stiffness in their limbs, problems with fine motor skills, so they have problems doing things like brushing their teeth, doing up buttons, things like that. So there's no cure for the disease, as I mentioned, but there are treatments that can help with these movement disorders. And I spoke to a neurologist about this, and he talks about the standard treatment.
These patients have a condition where the nerves in the brain, which produce dopamine, are prematurely dying, slowly. And so as they die, progressively more and more cells die, the symptoms worsen. And what these cells produce is dopamine. So we give them a drug called levodopa, which was discovered in 1960. And it does ameliorate a lot of these symptoms. So the tremor can improve, even though it doesn't always do, but the stiffness and the slowness does clearly improve.
So you've got some symptom relief with this levodopa, so that's helpful. But the bad news is that as the disease progresses, the drug stops working as well as it did at the beginning. So you end up with, say, 5-6 years into the disease, these patients aren't getting that same amount of time where they were getting relief from all of those movement disorders. So that's really devastating for these patients. And you know, there are options for these with advanced disease, but what happens with this new drug that we're talking about today is it's the same drug, so it's still levodopa, but it's being administered in a different way. So what they're getting is basically continuous delivery through the day through a tube that goes right into their small intestine.
Okay, and what are the negatives on administering this drug?
Well, we'll get to that in a minute, but let's find out exactly how this drug works.
Okay.
What it does is it gives you constant, continuous delivery of the drug while the patient is awake through the tube. So it's almost like an insulin pump. So what it does is it reduces the ups and downs, which I was talking about, so the patient is more able throughout the day with less of these extra movements.
So that's a huge deal, because I mean, you can end up with these patients in advanced disease. They're like in bed for the entire day, so the drugs really just aren't working. So this new option can really improve their quality of life.
Debilitating for
Absolutely.
a lot of people. 100,000 Canadians.
I know,
That's
it's
amazing.
a lot, right?
Okay, so negatives.
The negatives, the big negative here is it's very, very expensive. So this is really problematic. So basically it costs about $60,000 a year.
Wow.
Yes, and so compared to that oral pill, it's very inexpensive. So it's a real problem there. And right now, AHS, Alberta Health Services, only covers it for patients that basically nothing else is working for them.
Right.
So it's and it's decided on an individual basis, and it's only for a short amount of time. So the doctors are hoping that if they can show that those individual patients are really benefiting from the medication, that AHS will extend that coverage, but that again is not for every patient. So that's the big problem with this medication.
Well, Parkinson's Awareness Month this month. More information on your blog.
All on my blog, you bet.
As always, fantastic. Thank you so much,
You're
Leah,
welcome.
for introducing us to those options in Parkinson's Awareness Month.